Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to get into the essence of NESARA. This is the sixth of the series. It's called The Bondage of Social Security. And we're not just talking about Social Security payments. That's not what I'm getting after with that too. What we're talking about is how the Social Security system actually works. A couple things you need to know is that we start with the Fed in 1913. We have the IRS happening the exact same year. We talk about this one in earlier episodes. That's why I'm trying to pick apart each point in here. One major area of a fix that we need to do is in people who are retired. Most people are living way below poverty with their Social Security. I mean, it's an untenable number. And you're going to see some other things that they've done to even mess with the people even farther. With Social Security, first off, there is no reason to have income tax upon it. I mean, even a Roth IRA, you tax a bit more on the front end of that. And then what they do is then they let you take it out and it's untaxable. So there's really some unique tax advantages. But for instance, if you had a nest egg, what occurs is that if you say you had a nest egg of $200,000 and you wanted to make that a Roth IRA, you'd have to pay capital gains taxes up front, IRS taxation up front on that before it went into the fund, because as it comes out, there is no taxation with that too. Now, think about this for a second. When you pay into Social Security, which is around 7%, or 7.5% kind of thing, it is part of the taxation. It's not a pre-tax dollar point. Did you know that? It's just part of the way that they do taxation. So for instance, let's just say, you are in a tax bracket of 20% or 28% or higher with that too. You also add the Medicare part and you add the Social Security part that comes out of your funds up to $90,000. And I'll show you some of that as well. It's utterly ridiculous then in the 80s for them to have taxed the people for the money that they get that they should have been putting away, and that's what it was supposed to be done as. And yet that's not how they like to do this. And I know of people who are getting $700 a month in Medicare. You're like, what? Let's show you a whole series of videos, and we'll talk about them as we go along here with that too. So let's bring up the first one.
Security history of betrayal. Democrat or Republican? Facts are facts. Social Security cards up until the 1980s expressly stated the number and card were not to be used for identification purposes. Since nearly everyone in the United States now has a number, it became convenient to use it anyway, and the message, "not for identification," was removed. Our Social Security. Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat, introduced the Social Security FICA program. He promised, 1, that participation in the program would be completely voluntary. No longer voluntary. 2, that the participants would only have to pay 1% of the first $1,400 of their annual incomes into the program. Now, 7.65% on the first $90,000. 3, that the money the participants elected to put into the program would be deductible from their income for tax purposes each year. No longer tax deductible. 4, that the money the participants put into the independent trust fund rather than into the general operating fund, and therefore would only be used to fund the Social Security retirement program and no other government program. And under Johnson, the money was moved to the general fund and spent. 5, that the annuity payments to the retirees would never be taxed as income. Under Clinton and Gore, up to 85% of your Social Security can be taxed. Since many of us have paid into FICA for years and are now receiving a Social Security check each month, and then finding that we're getting taxed on 85.
Now, I kind of cut it off there, but the point is looking at, I mean, remember, it was supposed to be deductible on the way in. Nope. And then on the way out, you weren't supposed to be taxed. So it's not deductible, which means it's taxed. That 7.65% is taxed on you. And it's also taxed up to 85%. I mean, it's mind-boggling how they've done this, and we've stood for it with that too. But it's deeper than that circumstance. Let's show you something else that they're doing right now.
That you need to understand. I worked 24 years in the Border Patrol. I have Social Security. You're a working man. You're pouring into Social Security. You got truckers, 30 years, construction workers, nurses, stockbrokers, whatever. When I bring in my illegal alien grandma that's never worked a day in her life, you know that she gets the maximum Social Security benefit payout? What? So she'll get more money than me? For our grandmas and grandpas that are living paycheck to paycheck, illegal alien grandma from Sudan and Mexico, wherever, she gets more money than the person that's worked their whole life.
I mean, this is infuriating.
And that is also needs to be like, wait a second. This is ridiculous. This is what they're trying to accomplish. They're buying votes. This is how they do this. Okay. Now, listen, the Social Security also has a system that numbering system was only supposed to be for the Social Security system. And then they created it as an identifier of you. It was never supposed to be an identifier, and yet they did it as well. This is why what FDR was trying to accomplish used to be one of my favorite presidents until I started understanding really what he was doing. What he was doing is putting us into the systems. He was creating a socialist economy with it too, and he did it back in 1935. There's just so many things that's wrong about this. Listen to this one.
Because if you don't know, this group up here in 1983 voted to tax Social Security, and then a few years later tax it again. It's all a scam. This is all a scam. I mean, we got people that's getting ready to retire that's going to try to live off $2,000 to $3,000. Impossible. It's impossible, because what happens, it comes up here, we spend it. We're 35 trillion in debt. We don't have any money. We're dead broke. And then taxpayers have $2 trillion in credit cards.
So, he's saying the same thing. I mean, if you didn't hear that one, sorry if I can't make it any louder, but he's saying, the whole thing is a scam. There's an insight of a senator, kind of, Tuberman is just talking a little about that situation. Pretty awakened guy to even say that. But it's never been stipulated before. If you think everything's going to stay the same, and this NESARA piece is just stupid. The point that is happening with NESARA has always been to boost the amounts to the retirees. That is stated over and over again. And people would look at me like, well, how much is the number going to go up? And I hear this all the time. Some people believe it's $3,000 to $5,000 total. I don't know what that number is. I would love to know what that number is specifically. But it's not that is not called a UBI, a universal basic income. Universal means the whole thing, right? I mean, universal is everyone. What we're talking about is Social Security has to be boosted because these people have been taken advantage of. And then finally, it's taken us almost 4 years for him to even say anything about it. And then Trump says this.
Fixed incomes who are suffering the ravages of Kamala Harris's inflation nightmare. It's a total nightmare. I'm promising no tax on Social Security benefits. This cruel double taxation of Social Security benefits only came into existence in 1984, and at the time it only affected a small number of recipients. Now nearly half of all seniors are forced to pay income tax on Social Security.
So he's saying to you there's not going to be any IRS taxation on Social Security. The only way, and he said that about tips, and he said that about overtime. The only way to do that is to delete the IRS. What we're talking about here is this bondage system is going to end, but we're going to have monies that has to be put into it. How do you do that? It's because the people in DC cannot be there because they want to have you under their thumb. And then Trump said this.
We had them all stopped, but they were heading that way. It's like fighting a war. And I went out to a news conference. I announced,
Wait, it's like fighting a war. Now he uses that as a simile, and I'm going, that is an simile.
anybody that touches any of our monuments or statues goes to jail for 10 years. Everybody left.
Okay, now I'm going to back this up a hair. I want you to listen to him again. Then he kind of stipulates something that we've all felt, when they mess in with monuments, right? But listen to the second part of it, which is more interesting, because he says war to monuments to.
Everybody left Washington, D.C. I was very lonely. They all left. I watched them. I watched their asses from the back. That's all I could see is thousands of asses.
Okay, wait a second. And we're going to play this again because it's just so good.
They were actually heading that way. We had them all stopped, but they were heading that way. It's like fighting a war. And I went out to a news conference. I announced anybody that touches any of our monuments or statues goes to jail for 10 years. Everybody left Washington, D.C. I was very lonely. They all left. I watched them. I watched their asses from the back. That's all I could see is thousands of asses.
Do you understand where he's going? I know you're thinking about all the protesters and the people were causing this, this nightmare, right? And they were, pouring really ugly things on monuments, right? And taking down monuments. You got to see between the lines here. You have to see what he's saying. What he's talking about is that there's a war in DC. When you strip away the things that are important to Americans, they had to leave DC. Who leaves DC? The Congress, the Senate, all of these people. They don't just get impeached. They're kicked out. They're the reason that we're in the position we are in. Guys, write your senators, write your congressmen. Tell them, hey, listen, I don't approve of anything you're doing. I don't approve of anything. Tell me that you're on the side of the patriot and see what they say. We don't even really know who they are. That's why I don't believe in elections, because this still has to get fixed. Even if God forbid we have a November election, we still have to have another election because we have all kinds of idiots in Congress and Senate, and we have idiots in governors like Whitmer. Come on, guys. When does that end? We have to have a full-on new everything. We have to have it down to the state senators. How about, for instance, the Springfield City Council, who are protecting 20,000 illegals in a town that's got 30,000 total? Right? That's kicking out the police chief, probably kicking out a lot of the police force, kicking out a ton of idiots. It has to be done. We have to have a clean flush of them. It's coming, guys. But that's part of NESARA. That's the cool thing. Social Security is going to get fixed, and it's going to get refunded. How does it get refunded? Because that's the money that we're taking from the idiots from Executive Order 13818. You have crimes against humanity. I'm taking your money, and there's nothing left for you. Guys, be encouraged. It's coming. And that part where Trump is talking about no taxes on Social Security, that's ripping down the systems all the way through and through. Thanks so much.